Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. Hi, this is Eddie K. Phillips, the host of the Erudition Network, interactive Black History show on YouTube, and I'm making mine my first appearances here on TikTok. I had been meaning to do a live here on TikTok for quite a while. I think I got on live once for just a little bit to check out the how it worked. I still don't quite know how it worked, but I am on here tonight. I'm going to give a couple of minutes because I wanted to start this at like 7. So right now it's just a general discussion. I'm going to hopefully you guys will come on. People will come on and they'll actually join. I'm going to try to be on for at least an hour to discuss some much needed things that I think we really need to start getting to here on TikTok. The subject for tonight has a lot to do with some of the misinformation that we're continually seeing on TikTok, some of the things that people are posting historically. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to get on and start doing a live session on here so that we can actually start getting some factual history out here. I see so much stuff being put on social media that is not fact-driven, that is not even fact-based, even slightly fact-based. So that's what we're going to get in here tonight. We're probably about 5 minutes before 7, at least my time. I'm here in Colorado, and so I'll take this moment to say to you that my name is Eddie Phillips. I am a public historian. I am actually a strategic historian, which means I use, and a polymath, which means I use multiple different sciences and areas in order to break down our history and to provide lessons on that. A few years ago, I started the Erudition Network, whose sole design was to provide independent history, predominantly Black history, but factual history to the public so that we could be better informed. I don't mind debate, but I do ask that when you debate, you provide debate with facts, not opinions, not things that have no factual meaning or something in which you're just saying to just get a thought out. Opine is great in the area that it is required or needed, but it is not so much when it comes down to people just making up things, especially when it comes to history. So we want to make sure that we're factual and that we know what we're talking about and that we're informing people correctly. Because when we don't do that, what we're doing is we're putting out propaganda and lies, or we're sensationalizing parts of history that don't need to be sensationalized. I often tell my students that Black history in itself doesn't need to be sensationalized. We don't need to add to it or make it worse than what it is because history speaks for itself. But too often, we have people who, in order to get views or to acquire some kind of audience, where they just go on and they say and do things that aren't factual. They regurgitate to you things about history that aren't real, that don't have any real factual basis, or they take something and they sensationalize it and they make it more than what it is so that it makes you feel like you know something because of the horror of it. A lot of that we don't need to add icing to the top of that cake. It's already what it is. Some of it is already it's horrible and it's a fact and we can prove it. It's better to teach a fact because a fact is stubborn and it can be actually beneficial for people to be able to have a fact and know what they're talking about. So that's what I do. That's who I am. I'm a public historian. You can always visit our, we have multiple episodes, live episodes we've recorded on YouTube. You go to YouTube, look up the Erudition Network, and you will see me and my wife have done multiple shows on many things from psychology, history. As I said earlier, I'm a polymath, so I tend to combine a lot of things. When I'm talking about history. So we're going to start. We're about 2 minutes away from 7. I put out something letting people know that we would be on at 7, but I'm going to start a little early because I just think it's good for us to start getting into this, because there are a couple of things I really want to talk about within this hour, and I really want to get into. As I said tonight, this episode is concerned with the myths and the propaganda and the folklore and the lies and the things that are often passed on TikTok. Things I've seen as I've been scrolling through and looking and seeing people just make up stuff. TikTok is full of Black history. That is true. But tonight, I want to talk about the biggest myths that I keep seeing people convolute. Rather, they're adding spiritualism to it. Rather, they're adding some political or socio-dynamic to it. But they keep adding things that don't make sense. And so I want us to talk about that tonight. In the chat, put down something if I don't cover something tonight that interests you. If you heard something that you think is a myth online about Black history, drop it in the comments. And I promise you, I will break it down live, and we will go over that. Not so we can create any more further controversy, but so we can actually share facts. Some of the biggest lies about Black history that I have seen on TikTok that go viral are what knowledge comes out of Africa. What are Africans really? What does it mean to have Black history? Today we're going to be correcting some of those, and we're going to give you some sources too that you could go to and actually grow yourself, right? I will not tonight, I don't mind having debate later, but I will not tonight have anybody come on as a guest or to be able to chime in. We'll do that later. I'm just not prepared to do that tonight with the setup that I have. But I don't, once again, I said I don't mind debate, but I don't like illogical, non-factual debate. All right, let's tap onto one of the first things that I've seen. So more than often, there's this myth that Africa was a dark continent. Africa had no civilization before Europeans, colonization or discovery. I've actually written a book. Erudition Network presents 101 questions on early world history. You can find it on Amazon. I would prefer that you get the digital copy because the digital copy actually works as a questionnaire book where you can answer questions, click on it, and it'll tell you if you're right or wrong, and it'll lead you to go and try to find the right answer. But it's a very hefty book, over 300 something sources for that book. So it's not just a questionnaire book, but it answers a lot of this. And one of the things I tried to talk about was Africa before the European, before slavery, before any of that. One of the most persistent myths on social media is that Africa was somehow uncivilized, that Africans were savage, that Africans didn't worship God, and that Africans didn't have a God. And the claim collapses. Those lies collapse immediately when you actually study African history, when you actually look back. Not in the first place people go is Egypt. But we're not talking just about Egypt. Whereas Egypt did develop hieroglyphics and architecture, and they had all of these advanced medicines and everything else. We must also understand that there were the Kingdom of Nubia, there was Axum, there was Mali, there was Zimbabwe. These kingdoms are important into the knowledge that has been shared worldwide. The Kingdom of Kush has their own pyramids. It is arguable that some of the Egyptian pyramids were designed based on earlier Kushite or Nubian technology. Some of the actual pharaohs of Egypt were Nubian, right? And so we can't take away and just assume that the architecture that we see in Egypt And we're going to get further into Egypt tonight because people like to throw that Egypt thing out here, right? We can't ignore these other important cultures. Axum, looking at Ethiopia, it's one of the four major powers of the ancient world, right? It provided a lot of spices. It provided a lot of design. It provided a lot of architecture and culture. It also is one of the earliest Christian African cultures, having accepted Christianity well before when people make that lie that the Europeans taught you Christianity. That's a lie. It ignores the Solomonic Empire that is spoke of in the Bible with the Queen of Sheba and Solomon and their union together. It ignores the African Phoenicians, who in fact helped the Israelites to be able to travel and circumvent Africa in order to even be noticed by the Queen of Sheba, right? It ignores all of these different things when we say that Africa was a dark continent and had no culture before Europe came to it. And then there's Mali. Mali is one of the richest empires of the medieval world. We often talk about the gold of Manu Musa and how much gold Manu Musa had, but that's just a part of it. Mali also was a huge area of study. It's one of the first universities. It's one of the first places of knowledge. And they trained and they gifted. And because we aren't taught about this, we go to the lie of that there was no history before the European. If Africa is portrayed as an empty civilization, then colonization is then framed or looked up as civilized, as bringing information to people who were not. But archaeology, the linguistics, the phononyms, the way we speak, the way our written records show that this is overwhelmingly disproved. We know that people came out of Africa and went east to Sumeria and further, all the way around until they came to the Americas. And some went across the oceans. And as time is going on, we're starting to see more and more that this is in fact a fact. So I think what we really need to understand when we hear this on TikTok or on social media is that these lies, they have a root. And if you're one of these people, because I know a lot of you all out here now are part of the FBA and different things that people are preaching out here. What I'm going to tell you that I do a lot with erudition is I keep it factual. And what I mean by fact is not what someone necessarily taught, what can be researched and sourced and validated. I don't debate emotionally with you. So if you're one of the ones that want to say, make a claim, come with facts. Because common claims online are great, but they're passing opines. But historical record says something different. It's a fact. It is something that is either shown, said, or discovered. That's what you should offer. If you're not offering that, if the person that you're listening or watching doesn't present that, then I would question them and ask them where did they get their information from. Because other than that, you're just getting ridiculous information from someone, and you may make the mistake of going out there and putting it out. And it makes you look as if you're not informed. And then you are ignoring centuries of archaeological research, centuries of people, both black, white, and whatever, who have taken the time to advance these studies and to go into this. You know, I often say there are a lot of black historians who have lived and gave their lives, lived for over the last 200 years and have written books and tried to document, and we ignore them or we don't even know they exist. And because we we don't go and reread, but we do listen. We have the desire for knowledge, but we're not actually going to seek it at a deeper level. So I wanted to make sure we talk about that. But yes, if you are interested in knowing, I'm going to try to at least give you 2 sources tonight per things that I talk about. You can go look up, I think Kevin Shillington, his book, History of Africa, The Civilization of Africa by Christopher Ehret, right? Those are good starts, good places to go. But there is a whole lot of stuff out there for you to go out there and actually study about the early places in Africa. And you can always go get my book. Again, go pick up the Erudition Network, 101 Questions book on Amazon. And I tell you, it's a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of things for you to go pull and also get sources. Get sources. And as we're bringing back the Erudition Network more here online, join us when we do these lives. Join us on YouTube when we do the interactives. Join us and ask those questions, and I guarantee you we will give you factual answers. We've even done shows based on audience participation and their questions. So please engage. I don't have a problem with that. One of the other things, leading off to the idea that Africa was a dark continent, is the idea that Egyptians are not African. I cannot tell you how many TikTok, Facebook, YouTube things I've seen where people are on here telling you that Egyptians are not black. Even having people in Egypt today saying that they're not black. The basic geography, right, of Africa, even ancient Africa, where it was Africa as we know it now and parts of what we see as the Middle East, was all Africa. Most of the ancient people, most of the great historians, Herodotus and others, Josephus and they referred to black people from Africa as Ethiopians, right? They call it what it is. But we allow ourselves to get caught into, no, I'm not lying, Peter. Everything I'm giving you is a reality. And if you don't believe it, hey, by all means, research what I'm saying. Here's the problem. Egypt is in Northeast Africa. Egypt has in the Kubanayas, or the lakes and the valleys, and as the water goes through the Nile. If you look at early human history, right? Early human history, we know that as the interpolation of the sun, I'm going to get into some science, which I told you I'm a polymath. The Reba Wobble, let's call it that, for the lack of taking time to explain the science. The top of Africa was hotter. It wasn't always that way. And when it caused that, there was a shift. There was a shift. That meant the people who were in northern Africa, who were now being pummeled with the sun and losing livestock and their ability to have wetlands, they moved south or moved north to the northeast, right? Where the Nile was. And this wasn't uncommon. You could read in the Bible and other ancient books where they talk to you about how people will constantly go to Egypt during famines as the change in how the sun worked on Africa affected them. And so the reality of it is that as they went to these Kubanayas, or Wadi Kubanai being one, they went to these areas and they lived and they informed what later became the Egyptian culture. This is before Egypt, as you know it, before the kingdoms of Egypt, which we can go into in later lives. This is a fact. Go look it up. So when we look at what happened and why people even lived in Egypt, we have to understand that they came there because of the changes in the earth, the changes in how the earth was being burned by the sun. And it also explains a lot of the sun gods and reasons why the Ethiopians and Egyptians and others referenced the sky and land a lot. So when we get up here and start saying silly things about how somebody whitened our culture or whatever, understand facts are stubborn things. Rather we look at archaeology, rather we look at genetics, and rather we can go any path, and it shows us these migration paths. Many of us get out here and put out falsified history without even understanding any of those things. You can put the theology, you can put the science, you can put the psychology, you can put the genetics, you can put all of those things together if you choose to study that way. But a lot of us don't do that. Trade and migration along the Nile River informed Egypt. Cultural exchanges from the Nubian kingdoms and southern kingdoms informed and helped to create Egypt. Shared religious ideas based on, as I told you, the sun and how they interacted with the world. I just mentioned to you how Herodotus and others described Egyptians as having darker skin and woolly hair, and many times referring to them as Ethiopian, as a lot of the early historians did. Now, the key point of all of that is that Egypt, by place of where it is in the north of Africa, also had visitors from across the Med, the Greeks and the others. And it also is a jump off point for people to go into what we now know as Europe and other areas. We know that early man traveled that way. We know he traveled east, and we know he traveled that way. We know that from looking at the genetics and understanding why skin became white. We understand that by knowing that there were dark-skinned, blue-eyed people who were found, and remnants have been found in European areas, all connecting them to Africa. There have been studies even done to talk about when the actual full understanding of white skin came into the human consciousness. We can do that through genetics. We have done that through genetics. So we can't continue to lie to ourselves. Egypt, coming forward in time, was a very multicultural civilization. The Romans went there, the Greeks went there. Greek philosophers stole things from there. They understood it as a jump off point for Africa, or what was known as Africa, before it was Africa. We can get into that later too, for those of you who don't like that term and misassign it to the Romans. By removing Egypt from the idea of what is black and what is African is historically inaccurate. But you have to ask yourself, why do people fight so hard to give Egypt a separate identity? What was so important? I can tell you what it was. It's the gold, it's the knowledge, it's the things that they keep digging into the ground to find. It's the reason why there are so many archaeological studies being done, and not only in Egypt, in all parts of Africa, because they want to know what inspired these people, what caused them to be so groundbreaking. That's what it is. So if you say Egyptians are Europeans, there's no credible history that places Egypt in Europe, just geographically. There's nothing civilizational-wise that places them in Europe geographically or civilizational-wise. And we lie. We've even lied now and told you that Egypt had a connection to North America. And none of this is based in real science, fact, or reason. None of it. But we tell this. Ancient populations varied in appearance. That is true. There are different degrees, even in our culture, of black people. Some are light-skinned and some are darker skinned. That's just what it is. But historically, when to identify only with a complex of how you look is foolery. And if you are one of the people who say that, well, I'm an FBA, I'm a fundamentally black American, and Egypt has something to do with it, Egypt is a part of your history. It's a part of African heritage and history. It is influenced by the same history that should influence you every day. That's what it is. Go and pick up some books and start to actually study the ancient Egyptian culture. Look at an anatomy of how all of that played into Africa and how Africa as a whole played into them. And if you are one of these ones who want to ignore history, I'm going to tell you this. History informs you. History informs your perception of self. It informs the way people see you. When we're taught, I always tell students, one of the first things that's taught as we go, especially in America, as we go through school, is the first time we actually see black people, a lot of times they're in chains. Now, if you're in a class with different people, white, black, or whatever, and you're a black person and you see the first time that they mention your culture and history is in chains, that not only informed you improperly, it informed others also. So when people say, "Oh, well, I don't really care about it. It doesn't really affect me." We're seeing in today's society, it affects you very much. It's affecting the way people see it. It's affecting the way people make decisions. It's affecting the way that leaders in countries refer to countries as crap hole countries. How they denigrate, right, and separate other cultures as being less civilized, as we talked about earlier. And many of us have grown up in schools and situations where it has affected the way we look at ourselves. When we start to just accept the mentality of the enslaved, which unfortunately, even in the Prussian decision-making schools of America that shape you to be a good citizen, that is what a lot of us have been taught. We've been taught that black history started with slavery. We've been taught that black people sold their own into slavery. We've been taught that black people aren't worthy. All of these lies, not based on any early history, any absolute fact. And the myth of this has appeared and does continue to appear in our textbooks and our social media and it constructs our decisions. The story of black people did not begin in 1619, contrary to some of you all's belief. It did not start in 1619. African civilization and advancement existed for thousands of years before the Atlantic and Eastern slave trades. Africans were making decisions, creating societies well before. And even when we get to the Americas, black history is not defined only by slavery. Who were the loyalists who joined in the American Revolution to join the Brits to fight against the colonists? Who were the ones who tried to join the revolutionary armies over here? Washington would not accept slaves, but he already had brigades of free black people. Where did they come from? So we can't just accept the fact that everything is based only on slavery. We ignore even the things that happened after, the Reconstruction leadership, the senators and the congressmen, and the people who helped to rebuild areas of the country that were decimated by the Civil War. South Carolina being one. And South Carolina being one of, right now, in many ways, one of the most racist and bigoted states that constantly tries to suppress the history of black people. Florida being another, which was a place where free and escaped black people went when the Spanish held Florida. Reducing black history to slavery is historically inaccurate, it's psychologically damaging, It has damaged scores of and generations of our kids, some of us. It's made us actually start to see ourselves as separate, different, based on oppression and violence. It has erased centuries of cultural development, resilience, unity. Most of us don't remember the unity and the connection that we had even with our brothers and sisters in South America. None of that is remembered because the propaganda that is put out here is designed to make us not remember. And you have to ask yourself, why do schools often start Black history with slavery? Why don't they talk about early civilizations? Why don't they talk about the rise? They do it for England, they do it for Spain, they do it for Portugal, they do it for Germany, they do it for France, but they don't do it for Africa. And then we allow ourselves to be pulled into the propaganda. When you say Black history is just slavery and crime, you take away from those who fought against that. You take away from those who actually proved that to be a lie, that Blacks were ignorant and stupid. You take away from the Phyllis Wheatleys, the Benjamin Bannekers. You take away from those people who actually showed and proved to Black people and whites that we're not an ignorant people. You resort to myth, propaganda, and exaggeration. And then you say, well, my people are always free, or I'm African, and so it doesn't bother me. Slavery never affected Africa or me. You know, we're separate. That's stupid, and that's a lie. The slave trade had a devastating effect on both the people who were bought over here into South America and Northern America. It had an effect on African societies and the diaspora as a whole. Some of the cultures who sold slaves to the Portuguese and the Spanish didn't understand the difference between Eastern slavery and what would become chattel slavery. And once they were informed about it, stopped. That's the other part we don't talk about in history. Stopped supporting that type of slavery. So then what did the slave traders do? They had to raid, go in and grab who they could. These are all facts. These are real. These are not exaggerated things. These are not propaganda. These are not sedation. This is the fact. Acknowledging that history is necessary. It's necessary to understand the ancient world and the modern world and why we are where we are. You cannot continually make up arguments, those who get on TikTok and other social media and make up things, when you challenge people to actually study. You have to do that. Go out there and get books. Henry Louis Gates Jr. Has books on African history. Ira Berlin, Many Thousands Gone. There are so many books that you can go in and actually look for the history of how it affects you. That other lie that only Black Americans history matters. We're the only ones that should celebrate and understand Black History Month and Black history. You don't understand how, or you're not trying to understand how your Black life as an American over here is part of a larger global diaspora and how that diaspora was formed, and you're not informing yourself on how that migration, trade, and colonialization affected everyone. That's why we can call someone a migrant now and say they're an illegal alien and say they don't have any purpose here in America, and forget that majority of the slaves or the enslaved that were taken from Africa were taken to South America before they ever came to the Americas. More went to South America. Those ancestors that you have down there, and then when they broke up the ability for them to be able to continue what they were doing, when African tribes said, no, we will no longer sell slaves to you, When the British realized, okay, this is increasing empires, we need to stop this and fight against this too. When the Ascenso del Negro, which was created by the Spanish, was then revoked, they went back down to South America and started getting the blacks from South America and brought them to North America because they could make that trade. And we neglect to remember how we are connected with those people from South America. Another lie. The reason why we know a lot of this exists is because Africans, both in America and across the world, they wrote. But another lie that comes out is that they had no writing systems other than the hieroglyphics that you see from the Egyptians. There's no system. That's a lie. But it's constantly being used as propaganda, racist propaganda. Africa had many writing systems. Hieroglyphics were just one. The Ge'ez script developed in Ethiopia, and it's still used in context today. Ajami writing, African language, which was written using Arabic script all across West Africa. And we can go on. And the CB symbols, right? We can go on and talk about how they wrote and how they documented things. But because we don't look at the documents and the things that are of African origin or which are of Eastern origin, we spend so much of our time focused on European Western misconception. So then people get on social media and they make statements and they say things and they do things and they lead us down this train of illogical thought until we eventually realize, I don't really think this person knows what they're talking about. And most of the times, a lot of the times, it's too late. Many African societies preserve history through oral traditions and trained historians. Let me say that again. Africans had trained historians who passed the knowledge down. Even in our own enslaved people who were brought over here, a lot of them were the groups who passed that information down. These were not ignorant people. But we do hear people say, well, Africans had no writing. They never wrote anything down, so how do we know? That's a lie. That's a lie. It is a retort to make us again think that these were ignorant people who had no idea what they were talking about. It's just what it is. You can almost argue that Africa, as people went into Sumeria and other places, we know from language, from the study of phonemics, that they influenced the language as people traveled and journeyed from Africa to all parts of the world. But writing developed in a lot of places based on their script. In multiple civilizations, including Mesopotamia, China, Mesoamerica. And I will gladly get on with you at any other time as I kind of going through these things summarily. But these are facts. If you want to dismiss African intellectual traditions and say it has nothing to do with you, understand that African knowledge systems helped explain cultural patterns and they survived even into the Americas. That is why Africans were able to thrive in areas of agriculture, farming. They could take that knowledge. They came from people who were metal workers. They came from people who understood how to grow cattle and how to utilize what was in the forest and in the woods. If you don't believe that, go read about Timbuktu, the Sanye Empire, Multiple books out there about that. Go get my book where I break it down for you and I try to explain to you the different civilizations of Africa so you don't have to constantly tell yourself or go into the idea of what someone tells you. Go read, and I gave you the references in that book. Go pull it up. Go on Amazon and just type in the Erudition Network, and you'll see the book, both the print book, which is expensive, but I want you to go get the digital book because I want you to have something with you that you can take with you everywhere, that you can reference when someone sends you, happy birthday to you, to someone sends you down a false path. I want you to be able to distinguish what is actual history and then what is foolery. Because a lot of and some have been on here, I've seen some of the comments, a lot of the pseudo-historians who are gaining followers on TikTok and social media are not providing you with facts. Social media often, just because this is the psychology of it, it rewards controversy, emotion, and you present it with a certainty that you know what you're talking about. And it does not push for careful scholarship and careful academics and trying to get you. And let's be honest, let's be real. Most of us came out of school system where they made history one of the most boring classes in school. Because every year they regurgitate, they put out the same things. Nothing to challenge you, and very often nothing to connect you with the history. And so for blacks, you come away from it going, man, I don't want to keep talking about slavery. I don't want to keep talking about the abuses that was done against people. I don't want to keep going down that path. I don't want to keep doing that. You get bored listening to the Queen of England, the Kings of England, and what they did, and never seeing a connection with you. Too often, the pseudo-historians on here, they'll give you a simple explanation to a very complex historical problem that will take multiple hats for you to wear. Theological hats, scientific hats, statistical hats. And maybe that's not your strong point. But other than breaking it down for you in a way that you can basically understand, or giving you somewhere to go where you can take a slower dive into it, they don't do that. I'm not here to just use confident language to you. I'm not here to tell you what the history is. I'm telling you to go out and challenge what you hear tonight. Go pull up my book. I guarantee you, put it up against any history book that you have here, and you will see all of the sources, all of the first primary sources. I'm not about your nuance. I'm not about to here to spread your viral claims about the enslaved and not give you how or why this happened. Though it is very important for us to talk about Black Wall Street, how did those people get to Oklahoma? What was the situation that created that system? And then what destroyed it? And then how did they rebuild it? Because we very rarely talk about the rebuilding after the abuse. Mainstream historians also are put into a situation where they're owned by whatever university or whatever job they have. This is why a public historian, independent historians have to be very, very specific in what they're doing, and at the same time, not beholden to anyone. Because if the university says, well, you shouldn't be online teaching that because that, even though it's factual, that's not a part of our curriculum. Mainstream historians often hide truth. Not that they don't know it, but they hide it. Historians constantly debate each other and revise the interpretations, and they tell stories given from whoever they are contracted or conditioned by. That is the opposite of presenting information. I am not on here to be a pseudo-historian, and I'm not on here to try to just necessarily gain followers with lies. I want you to challenge lies and learn facts. I want you to grow. One of the things that we often see on the Erudition Network is let's learn together. And immediately what that does is that pushes away the folks who know that they're pseudo informed and can't keep up with the fact. A lie can travel a long way, but it will falter and fail when confronted with the truth, when confronted with a fact. And when that happens, you start to see the phonies fall off. That's in all areas of study: academic, theological, scientific, statistical. It doesn't matter. You will always see those who say, okay, that's too far for me. Because they are proven to be wrong. Misinformation seems to always travel faster than facts, and there is a reason for it, because research shows us that false information spreads faster because people take it in quicker. That which is accurate may take you a little bit of time to digest. This comes from study. MIT did a study that found false news spreads about almost 10 times faster on social media than any factual reporting. We got a story. It's a story out here right now. I was seeing where some celebrity, they believe 2 celebrities are married. Rather that be false or fact. They haven't said if they are or not, but it's spread all over the world already because it only takes one person to say it. That's how misinformation works. It triggers an emotional reaction. It confirms whatever you want to believe. And it requires a lot of less effort for you to understand the essence or the depth of it. Because the truth is, careful research, factual research, takes time, takes nuance. It takes not only for the person who's teaching it to you to know what they're talking about, it also takes time for once I tell you, hey, go look at this, go do that. It takes time and nuance for you to validate if it's factual and then to grow your own knowledge. That doesn't perform well on algorithms that are designed for engagement and quick play. Right? And then you have people who don't even understand why they don't want to learn. But I could ask you, have you ever seen a viral, something that was put out as history, claimed on TikTok, that then turned out later to be just a lie? We all have. We all have. You have people that'll tell you, well, it can't be actual facts because facts are censored. We are in a technological boom in a world like never before. You can go study information from Timbuktu to Beijing, all parts of Africa. You can go pull anything and translate it. But we prefer to get that quick fix. I tell you, go pull up that MIT study on misinformation spread, done in 2018, and look at how quickly a person just can lie and know they're lying. It's what it is. And why we have to do better. Why we have to grow and be better. As I sit here tonight, and I decided I was going to do more and more getting on TikTok. And it's not just because I think that 100 million people will follow. Oh, I know that there will be challenges. But the thing is, we have to start. We have to start. We have to start somewhere with facts. No, we're not joining anything tonight. I'm just not as savvy with TikTok in order to do that tonight. But I promise you, coming up in other sessions, we will do that. But I will tell you, as I caveated at the beginning of this live, I do not mind debating anyone, but come with facts. If you come with theory, opinion, and nothing factual, then it is pointless. It is pointless. Because that means that if you want to keep pushing that and not accept the reality of what is factual, what we has proven, that's the key. That's the thing that happens on here a lot. Folks don't want what is proven. They want what is theoretical, what may or may not have happened. And my challenge is always to push history beyond that mind frame. Beyond that mind frame. So I think I've been on. It's been on for quite a while now. I will, however, open it up for these last few moments for many of you, because this is my first time doing a live on here. I tried to keep up with some of what was being said. Some of it was just ridiculous, but you can drop a question in here, something that you may be curious about from history. And it doesn't just have to be Black history. And I promise you we will answer it here as best we can tonight. Because I think that, again, this is something that's important that we need to talk about. If not, I will go a little bit further and answering some more, because I wrote down a couple. One of the things is, well, where did Africa have any information? If Africa had no information, places like UNESCO and the Library of Congress have said that there was not anything there, any knowledge or whatever. So I'm gonna direct you then to the idea of Timbuktu. I had a person that said that they heard of Timbuktu in a song. I was like, yeah, you did. A lot of people say Timbuktu, and they've seen it in cartoons and different places. I always mention this in different military songs. But that's a sign or a reveal that a lot of people don't know what Timbuktu was, and it provides that anti-African ignorance to our culture and our human culture, that something can be hidden in everyday speech that you don't really understand. Timbuktu is not just a cartoon. It's not just something in a military song. It was an important center of learning. And because it was based on Islamic belief, a lot of the Christian cultures tried to push us away from it. But it does not take away the fact of the facts or the knowledge of what is really there. There is knowledge there, manuscript, culture. We know about legal things. We know about the trade that happened in the Eastern slave trade because of the documents that can be found in places like Timbuktu. You know, we always talk about the Library of Alexandria and how Egypt had this great library. And we forget that there were libraries all over the continent of Africa, all throughout what was early Africa, into the places that we look at now, like Iraq, Iran. All of these places had institutions of learning and intelligence. Why does this matter? Because it rebuts the lie and the myth and that Africa had no literacy, as we talked about earlier. Africa had no history, had no tradition, had no written scholarship. That was nothing. Timbuktu is a standing monument today of how manuscripts were collected from ancient time that show something else, show that Africans were intellectuals, show that Africans were scientists, show that Africans were geologists, show that Africans knew and understood the world. They were copying, they were preserving, they were teaching, they were commenting, they were informing. And so the Greek philosophers, the Roman philosophers, and all these European philosophers who took that information out of Africa, the ones we give so much credit to, the Aristotles, the Socrates, and all of these folks who we give so much credit to. But we think that Timbuktu and places like that are just names, words. And even more so, we get people who get on social media because that's what we're talking about tonight, and corrupt that information by giving you falsified information that has nothing to do with the actual information that you can even access today. But we sit here and we say, well, why is that important? What is Timbuktu? Where are these libraries? Where are these people in Africa? But then here's the thing. When you mock that, you take away from the scholarly centers of knowledge and you go right back to the Prussian and the European and the Western philosophy of education that has structured us to believe as people of color as being enslaved, savage, as I told you earlier, providing no knowledge. When we focus only on the Cambridge, the Oxfords, and everything else, and we ignore the information that came out of Africa. Or when we go to these FBA, because I'm going to get into you all tonight too, that I'm separate. Well, then you're not opening yourself up to the wider intellectual inheritance of Africa and the diaspora. You do not stop your learning just because you are the children of the Black American enslaved. Those people who, as I told you with the grouse, who passed information down verbally, tried to keep you informed. The scholars and the people like Carter G. Woodson, the W.E. Du Boises, all of these folks who went and read those books, all of these people who went to go study outside of the American system to preserve scholarly information. This was not done just simply to keep a record. It was done so that we all could stay informed. Let me restate that. We all could be informed. All. Black, white, or whatever. So if you say Timbuktu or the places in the Sangha Empire or in Mali or any of these cultures who documented their learning aren't important, you're lying. And I know that you can pick up history books. There's one popular history book out right now that talks all about this UNESCO idea of how Africans were informed. But did you know that UNESCO and the Library of Congress actually both document Timbuktu and other areas, African areas of learning? They have manuscripts that they have absconded with from those schools and those areas. Because again, we live in an information boom. Because see, they want to preserve that stuff too. It's the reason why they go dig up in Egypt. There's a reason why they dig throughout Africa. There's a reason why they're digging in South America. There's a reason why they're constantly digging up places where people of color have lived. There is a reason. So, as I'm getting this thing telling me that live will end, again, as I told you all, I'm trying to learn a little bit about TikTok. That's fine. If it ends in 5 minutes, I think we've covered a lot. I wanted to introduce myself to the TikTok audience. I wanted to get on here. And like I told you, this is not about, I know there are going to be people who won't like it. Because I'm telling you, you got to bring facts to me. And as we do start, because I do see the thing where it says I can invite you in and talk to you. As we do that in latter sessions, we will do that. But you better bring facts. The last thing I want to talk about in this last 5 minutes is something that is near and dear to me. Science. Very often I'm challenged by people online who tell me that, well, that's great, but Black people didn't do much for science. We only see white scientists and different people, the Einsteins and different people who provided. And it's something that bothers me because even going back in the ancient times, we know that is a lie. Why would you go and dig up Egypt if that was not the truth, that they provided something? That you're constantly amazed at what these ancient African cultures were doing. But then when we talk about simple names like George Washington Carver, Charles Drew, Daniel Hale Williams, most of us don't know these people. And even if we heard the name before, we couldn't tell you what they did, like the Benjamin Banneker's or whatever. We don't gravitate to the understanding that black scientific interaction is not marginal. It's substantial. We could not have gone to the moon or could not have pierced past this atmosphere without black engineers and females and male and female. We wouldn't know how to plant our plants and when is the best time to do it, right? Without some of these black farmers and black intelligent people who taught the European how to do it. Today, a man like Charles Drew is most often neglected, but his work on how to preserve blood and blood plasma changed the world. Had he not discovered that, many of us would be dead. Many people in the military would be dead. But we don't talk about them usually in history. The Katherine Johnsons who calculated for NASA, we don't talk. And then when we hear about it, we're like, oh, wow, that happened. But those are not one-offs. There are many, many people, black and brown people who contributed. You know, I come from a polymathic mentality. So I bring a lot of different areas of expertise together. And it takes a lot of study. And I'm going to tell you, everybody ain't meant for the study. I get it. Everybody's not meant for the studying. But the reason why I think a polymath is so important is because it allows me to break out these things to you from different areas of study. Because there's so much craziness. When people say black Americans count and African history is relevant to the FBAs and we are the ones who contributed science and this thing, because they don't go further back or they don't even look into current history to understand how all of that plays. So then you see someone like Dr. Sebi and you look at the things that he did and you look at people who are over in Africa and people that are over here and you don't realize that they talked to each other. They interacted with each other. They didn't see themselves as separate. But we have people who are trying to be separate. Will you get people who will tell you, right, that blacks didn't create anything? And then you go get a book and you realize black people created everything. And then you realize, man, that's really kind of like not an exaggeration. And it's not an insult to world history because in fact, it just shows how we played into the actual world. You have to look at these documented contributions, these sources, and you got to go deeper into who these people are. We're getting ready to launch a show called Faces in History, where we talk about a person, right? And we want you to see the person first and see if you know who it is. And then teach a lesson on who that person was so you can be informed, not just from something that you saw in a book. See, because they're quick to show you an enslaved, enchained person in a history book. But very, very, very rarely will they show you a Benjamin Banneker confronting a Thomas Jefferson who said that blacks were not able to be were not educable, and showcasing to him that he is foolish, right? And then once we understand that, what am I? I'm a child of God, just like you are. I do not believe in the crabs in the barrel mentality. And as I get ready to close down this session, because I don't know when it told me 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you something that I learned over the last few months. I took ill. And as I was laying in my bed, sick, almost died, I asked God, the God that I believe in, not all this stuff out here. I said, God, I don't want to leave here and not provide not provide knowledge to our people. I don't want to leave here as with all of the gifts and things you've given me and not provide and not do what you told me to do. And if you want to know, it's to inform, it's to teach, it's to factually teach. We have so much that we have contributed, and that whole crabs in the barrel mentality still exists, where we pull each other down because we don't want one person to feel they know more, and we don't understand that that's not how our ancestors wanted us to be. That's not what they wanted. They were an inclusive people. They passed things down verbally. They passed things down secretly in writing. That's how many of us learned what root to go put in our water and what to put on our ailments and remedies. That we learned that. Why couldn't grandma probably couldn't read, but she can cook multiple different dishes and meals from memory? We have to be better people than that. We have to be better. And I asked God, I said, show me what to do and I will follow. Because I felt that I didn't do enough. And I felt if I left this world, I don't want to not do what I was sent here to do. History matters because when people steal your history, they can control your destiny and your identity. And that's why I do the work that I do on the Erudition Network. That's why I go so far as I go. If you've learned something tonight in the hour or so that I've been on, this is the first of many. I wanted to get on TikTok and I wanted to talk to you all directly, whoever would scroll past. I'm here to teach you on a level that many of you are not used to. I'm here to provide that information and that guidance, but I'm only like those grouse. I'm just the person to tell you, but I'm also going to direct you how to grow you. This network says growing knowledge and understanding, and I meant that. We are here to grow knowledge and understanding. Understanding means understanding each other and how we all play into this plan. This wonderful, wonderful plan that connects all of us. Black history is not just Black history, it is world history. I've studied history for almost over 30-something years. I've studied quite a many things for 30-something years. And the biggest problem today is the lack of factual information. We got to do better. We got to do better, and we will do better. All right, I'm going to get off of here. I thank all of you all who joined us, who came in the room, who have watched this. Join us on the Erudition Network. I plan to be on YouTube tomorrow. First time I've been on in quite a few months as I've started taking ill. We're closing down a fundraiser. If you want to, you can go look on our YouTube or Facebook pages, and you will see the link for our fundraiser. 510. We're trying to build independent history that is not being dictated by universities, people, or whatever, and to teach you facts. And sometimes that takes money. That takes things for us to be able to get on these systems and to do these things properly and to teach you well. But I plan on doing that. Rather help or not, we will get that done because I believe that that is what needs to be done. All right. I thank you for joining me as we went over these TikTok myths. You all be blessed. Be blessed. I hope, again, that you enjoyed this episode. I don't really know how to log off of here. But I guess when I close it, it'll close. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. I plan to be on here more. Join us tomorrow. I'll be on at about 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock Colorado time. I forget what time that is, but Mountain time. I'll be on probably an hour, 2 hours Eastern time. So if you want to join us then, get on YouTube, go to our our YouTube page, type in the Erudition Network. You'll see us. Click on that, ring the bell, and you'll get a notification, and you'll know to join us. And you can be a part of the interactive where you can get in the chat and start asking questions. All right. Until then, you all be blessed. God keep you. See you later.